What if one dinner changed the lives of thousands of people? When President Trump suddenly stands up in line with sailors at a Norfolk base, no one suspects that a secret operation is underway that is not making the news. A conversation with a young naval engineer named Cy Mercer at the dinner table sets off a chain of events that could change the lives of veterans across the country. But why is the president suddenly taking matters into his own hands? And what does he whisper to an aide that makes the most incredible changes? Stay until the end. This dinner will change everything. When the president shows up in the dining room, the Norfolk Air Base was living its usual routine. The same faces, the same conversations, the same clatter of cutlery in the mess hall. Everything was going on as usual until the news broke. Are you serious? The sailor in uniform turned to his comrade, trying to shout over the noise. Trump is here. Yeah, damn right. They say he's on his way. The room seemed to freeze, then explode. Someone chuckled out loud. Someone nervously adjusted their collar. Even I, who usually calmly chewed my card, now glanced at the entrance. Hank Reynolds, a senior petty officer with 30 years of service, just shook his head. How will they feed us better now? C. Mercer, a young engineer, sat across from him, thoughtfully twirling a fork in her hands. She knew what a presidential visit meant, the speech, the camera, the show. But something about this day felt different. And if it doesn't show up, she muttered. Hank raised an eyebrow. Have you ever seen a president who refused a microphone? But before she could answer, he appeared in the doorway. The dining room was quiet, so quiet that you could hear someone drop a spoon. Donald Trump stepped inside. No long escort, no fanfare. He didn't even look like he was going to speak. Instead, he silently picked up a plain plastic tray and stood in line with everyone else. Damn it. Someone from the left exhaled. Is he really going to eat our food? She blinked, not believing her eyes. The officers were crowded to the side, clearly not how to react. The admirals were exchanging nervous glances. This was not protocol. But Trump moved forward in line as if it were any other day. Mashed potatoes, a chicken tender, some beans. He didn't pick the best, didn't demand anything special. He simply picked up his tray and turned, looking around the dining room. He's going to the VIP zone, you'll see, one of the officers whispered. But the president did not move toward the special table open for him. Instead, he walked between the rows of tables and sat down at one of the regular ones, directly across from she and Hanka. Silence again. This time absolute. May I? He asked, seeming to actually have a choice. She didn't know what to answer. Thousands of questions flashed in her head, but her lips only said, yes, of course. Trump put down the tray, picked up a fork, and began to eat as if nothing unusual was left. Hank snorted, shaking his head. I never thought I would say this, but you surprised me, Mr. President. Trump smiled without looking up. Glad to hear it. Now tell me, is it real? C frowned. What exactly? Service. Life. Everything that isn't in the reports. What pisses you off? Hank shook his head. I've been here since 1992, and no one has ever asked me that. Trump put down his fork. Well, then it's time to ask. The buzz in the dining room gradually began to build, but all eyes were still on their table. People didn't know what would happen next. And then there was a conversation that changed everything. The president in line, coincidence or game? The dining room was still dead silent. The sailors glanced furtively at the table where the U.S. president sat. No one understood what was going on. Was this a joke? A political stunt? Or was there really something going on? Sia looked at Trump, who was calmly eating chicken and mashed potatoes as if he ate there every day. Is he serious? A sailor at the next table asked quietly. He just turned around and is now sitting with us? I don't know, the other answered just as quietly. But if this is PR, then why the hell is there no camera? And indeed, there were no cameras. No press secretaries, no TV reporters. Just the Trumps, the soldiers, and the trays of food. She felt her palms sweat. An hour ago, she had planned to just have lunch, and now she was sitting across from a man who could change someone's fate with just one word. But why? Do you do this often? She asked finally, deciding to break the strange silence. Trump looked up. What exactly? Sit at the same table with the soldiers and have informal conversations. The president grinned and opened his fork. Rather than thinking. Why? Trump leaned forward slightly, as if he were saying something important. Because otherwise they lie to me. Hank raised his eyebrows. Are they lying to you? According to plan, the treacherous potato is on the plate. Always. The higher you go, the more you are told not what is, but what you want to hear. Departments, advisors, statistics, all this is filtered to make the image look prettier. but I want to know how it really is. He looked at C. So tell me, what's wrong? C exchanged a glance with Hank. She was 24. She wasn't a general. She didn't write reports at the White House. She just worked, like thousands of others like her. I don't know where to begin, she muttered. Start with what annoys me, Trump said. She froze. Is it annoying? C took a glass of water, took a sip, and then exhaled. My father served for 22 years, she said. When he was written up, he couldn't find work. Trump frowned. Why? Because no one needs a veteran. People love the military as long as we are in uniform. As soon as you retire, you are thrown out. Silence fell over the mess hall again. Several sailors sitting nearby were clearly listening. Hank nodded. She's right. Most of us love our service. But we know that as soon as we take off our shoulder straps, we're just numbers. Trump thought for a long moment, then looked at She. Where is he now? Who? Your father. At home in Virginia. Works as a security guard at a supermarket. The president turned slowly, then leaned over to his aide and whispered something in his ear. He suddenly stood up and walked out of the dining room. C frowned. What did you just do? Trump smiled. We know that this error can be quickly corrected. And it was at that moment that something inside her clicked. It wasn't just a conversation. It was something more. One question that raised the president. She looked at Trump, but he was no longer eating. His face was frozen, as if he was pondering something important. Why is this happening? He finally asked. She swallowed. She hadn't expected the conversation to go this far. Usually when she brought up the subject, people would just nod and change the subject. But no, that veterans are a problem that is easier said than done, she replied. Trump is slowly changing. 22 years of service, and after that a security guard at a supermarket? Yes. This is not fair. C smiled bitterly. Do you know how many people like him there are? Thousands. People in the uniform of a protected country, and then they are simply thrown out. They write resumes at interviews, but employers do not want to take them. For some they are too military, for others they are not flexible enough. Hank put in his word. Or here's another example. I've been serving for 30 years. Will they give me a normal work week? Yes. But will it provide me with a normal life? No. Trump looked at him. And what will you do? I don't know. Maybe I'll park my car at the airport. Maybe guard a warehouse. As a result of any crap that suppliers produce. The president shook the fork in his hand. This is fucking wrong. He suddenly pushed the tray away sharply. Why is this being kept quiet? Why don't I see this in the reports? She shook her head. Because officially everything is not so bad. There is program support. There are retraining courses. On paper everything looks good. Trump narrowed his eyes. And in reality? Hank chuckled. But in reality, it's a dud. There are programs, but they work in one place. Support? It's about endless forms and waiting for half a year. Do you know what's the worst thing? What? Veterans die. They find the meaning of life. They understand that no one needs them. And many of them commit suicide. Silence. Trump waved his hand across the table, something decisive for himself. Then he turned back to She. And your father? How is he holding up? C shrugged. He doesn't complain. Tell him he's happy with this job at least. But sometimes I see him looking at old photos of the ship, of the crew. And I know what he's thinking about. About what? That he was needed then. Trump leaned back. And now he is not needed? Now he is just one of 1,000 who were ignored by the system. She felt her throat tighten. She hadn't expected to say it out loud. But she did. And at that moment, Trump's aide returned. He walked up to the president and leaned in to whisper something. As a result, a slight smile touched his lips. Great. C frowned. What excellent. The president looked at her again. Let's see how quickly we can correct this error. She didn't understand what he was talking about. But after a few hours, she noticed. And then the whole world would know, too. One call that changed destiny. She kept her eyes on Trump. He stared silently at his aide, who turned and looked away, having just pulled off something important. What did you do? Her voice was quieter than she intended. The president smiled but did not answer immediately. He picked up his fork, twirled it in his hand, and looked at She. How long has your father been looking for a normal job? Almost 2 years, she replied, clenching her fists. First, he tried to get a job at an aircraft manufacturing company, but they said he had no graphic experience. Then he applied to shipbuilding and was rejected again. The only jobs accepted were as security guards. Trump shook his head. 22 years in the Navy, and they say he has no experience? Exactly. Hank chuckled. Welcome to the real world, Mr. President. At that moment, she's phone vibrated. She shuddered. She felt her insides tighten. Who could it be? She took out her mobile phone and looked at the screen. This is my father. Hank raised his eyebrows. Well, then answer. She pressed the phone to her ear. Dad? On the other end, I heard heavy breathing and then an excited voice. See, you won't believe it. What's happened? I just got a call. From Northrop Grumman. C froze. Wait, what? From Northrop Grumman. They said they had a high recommendation and wanted to hire me. I didn't even have time to apply. She looked up sharply at Trump. He continued eating as if nothing had happened. Dad, are you sure? This isn't a mistake? They said that personal preferences. President. C felt the world around her shrinking. Dad, are you serious? They offered me a contract. With a good salary. I don't know what to say. She slowly lowered the phone and settled on Trump. You did this? The president raised his eyebrows. Did you want him to get the job? He did. Hank whistled softly. Oh, fuck it. She still couldn't think. But how? The president shrugged. I made the call alone. She shook the phone in her hand. One call, and that was enough? That's the problem, see, he said, looking her straight in the eye. It's always been enough. It's just that no one wants to do it. At that moment, her chest tightened with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the realization of power. Power that changed the possibility of life, but no one used it. This is incredible, she breathed. Trump shook his head. No. What's incredible is that no one has done this before. And it was at that moment that she realized this dinner was just the beginning. The secret order no one expected. C is still a caregiver, unable to process what just happened. One phone call, and the problem that had plagued her father for 2 years was gone. Just in an instant. Hank shook his head, apparently not believing his eyes. Damn, if it's so simple, why hasn't anyone done this before? Trump leaned back in his chair and looked at him. Good question. There was a noise in the dining room. Everyone was discussing what had happened louder. People were exchanging glances, glancing at their tables. The news spread instantly. C felt a strange chill coming from her. This changes something, right? Trump took a paper napkin and wiped his fingers. Let's see. What does this mean? C didn't take her eyes off him. The president looked at his assistant, who had remained silent the entire time. Is everything ready? He nodded. Yes, sir. Excellent. Let's begin. Start what? C's voice trembled. Trump turned to her again. Look, do you think I made this call just for your father? Well, yes? Trump chuckled. No, C. I did it to test the system. To see if you can really change someone's life quickly if you just want to. She frowned. And? The president looked her straight in the eyes. And now we will do it for everyone. She didn't have time to answer. At that moment, Trump's assistant walked to the far corner of the dining room, took out his phone, and started calling. What's going on? Hank straightened up. Trump calmly drank his glass of water. How many veterans do you think are out of work right now? Tens of thousands, C answered. Exactly. Now let's imagine that they all receive calls. Hank narrowed his eyes. You're not joking. Never. Silence. C blinked. Are you really going to do this? Trump finished his water and put the glass on the table. Consider it already done. C felt something inside her turn over. She didn't know what to say. But after just a few hours, she realized that this conversation was changing the destinies of thousands of people. Open meeting and shocking shock. The next day, she was summoned. She didn't even know who had delivered the message. She just heard that the president wanted to see her. No details, no attention. Hank noticed her gaze. It's either very good or very bad, he muttered. C felt the same way. The meeting took place behind closed doors in a separate briefing room. The room included senior military officials, several advisors, and Trump himself, seated at the head table. She entered and the conversation died down. C, sit down, Trump said, gesturing to the chair opposite. She swallowed and sat up. The president leaned back. Do you know what happened in the last 12 hours? Not really. One of the advisors laid out documents on the table. We made calls. A lot of calls. C frowned. To whom? Heads of defense companies, heads of government agencies, hundreds of employers. We started the whole process for the country's veterans. Her breathing became ragged. So, you've already started? Trump pointed. Exactly. She didn't know what to say. We checked the statistics. One of the officials continues. The situation is worse than we thought. Tens of thousands of veterans are officially unemployed. Even more are employed in low-paid, temporary, or unskilled positions. C clenched her fists. I know. Trump leaned forward. That's why we're doing something real. Not another report, not a useless program. We're creating a system that actually works. C took a breath. How exactly? Trump looked at one of his advisors and saw the same change. We are contacting every veteran who has applied for at least one job in the last 2 years. Anyone who was rejected will be offered a new opportunity. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It's huge. It is necessary, Trump corrected her. He paused. Did you know that according to the data, the unemployment rate among veterans is not that high? Showed. But that's a lie, he continues. Because no one is looking at what kind of work it is. They're just looking at the numbers. Oh, he'll get a job. But in reality, he's delivering pizza or mopping floors. She gritted her teeth. Exactly. Trump looked at her carefully. And you will help us fix it. Her heart sank. What? You spoke about it openly. You know this problem from the inside. We need people like you to be emotional in this world. She blinked. Do you want me to? She helped change the system, Trump finished for her. She sighed deeply. She came here just to tell her father's story. And now she was calling for a change in the rules of the game. Stories that cannot be passed. She couldn't sleep. Her room at the base was the same as always, simple, austere, without frills. But now it felt like there was less air in it. Her head was buzzing. The U.S. president asked her to help change the system. She? An ordinary engineer? She felt that she had been given a responsibility for which she was not prepared. But that wasn't the point. The thing was, if she didn't do it, no one else would. The next day, something unusual happened in the dining room. When she walked in, there were already more people around than usual. It turns out that everyone knew something was changing. But the most unpleasant thing happened when one of the officers took the microphone and said, Today we have a new tradition. The hall fell silent. Every Friday dinner we will tell stories of real veterans of history who faced difficulties after service. Stories of people who were forgotten by the system. See froze in place. And first we want to tell the story of John Mercer. She raised her head sharply. On the screen that usually displayed the menu and announcement, a photo of her father appeared. John gave the Navy 22 years. After the show, he spent 2 years looking for a job. He got more than 50 rejections. He worked as a security guard for pennies. Until one meeting in this canteen changed his fate. She swallowed. There was a deathly silence in the room. But John is not alone. There are thousands like him. Someone in the room. Someone looked down. Everyone who sat at that table knew that this was true. She took a breath. And we are making sure that this story does not repeat itself. The officer finished. He put the microphone away. Someone in the room slowly applauded. Then a few more. And then the whole dining room. She clenched her fists. At that moment she realized. This is no longer just a conversation. It became a movement. One letter that changed everything. She never received letters from the White House. When she saw the envelope with the official seal, her heart sank. She ran her finger along the edge, feeling the thick paper, and suddenly realized. Her hands were shaking. There was no one in the room. Just her, the letter, and silence. She took a deep breath, opened the envelope, and unfolded the complex sheet. See. What happened with one conversation over dinner was so much more. You showed me something I didn't see. You said something others were afraid to say. I don't forget things like that. I promised you we would change something. And we did. But this is just the beginning. I know you weren't looking for this. You weren't looking for politics, for power, for authority. But that's exactly why you're needed. I want you to know that as long as I am here, this issue will not be ignored. I will do everything to ensure that no soldier or officer is abandoned after their service. And the next time someone says one vote doesn't make a difference, show them this letter. DT. See reread the letter 3 times. Then again. Somewhere deep inside her soul, she expected to feel joy or pride. But instead, something completely different was spreading in her chest. Responsibility. She understood that this letter was not just words. It was a challenge. A knock on the door brought her out of her thoughts. Come in, she said, putting the letter away in its envelope. The door opened and Hank stood there. He looked at her silently and then dropped the envelope into her hands. Is this what I think? Showed. So what now? He asked. She thought about it. She remembered everything. That dinner, her father's voice on the phone, the fertility in the dining room. She might say, now everything is changing. But she knew the truth. Now the real work begins. She took the frame, put the letter in it, and hung it on the wall. Now she couldn't let it become just a memory. This was supposed to be something more. One dinner that changed everything. What if an ordinary conversation in the cafeteria could change the lives of thousands of people? President Trump sat down with the sailors, and it all started with one question. What's bothering you? One call and father, she got the job. But that was just the first step. Veterans across the country began receiving offers they had been waiting for years. Morale at the base changed, and she realized that if he kept quiet, nothing would change. Now she couldn't stop. Now she had a mission. And if you think one vote doesn't matter, ask those whose lives were changed by that dinner. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell to stay updated with news stories that are too important to keep quiet about.